What happens when two bass road warriors spend quality time talking music and life with one of their peers? Bassist, educator, author David C. Gross and bassist and head honcho of KnowYourBassPlayer.com, Tom Semioli, trade dates with the legends of rock, jazz, funk, blues, folk, country, and more. Notes from an Artist, revealing conversations with the legends who've created the soundtrack of our lives. What happens? You're about to find out. It's another episode of Notes from an Artist.
Hi, this is David Gross, and along with my co-host Tom Semioli, I want to welcome you to Notes from an Artist. Tonight we are welcoming to our show drummer extraordinaire Denny Seiwell. Denny's resume includes Wings, James Brown, Astrud, Gilberto, Billy Joel, and a host of others. So let's begin our conversation with Denny Seiwell. Hi, Tom. Hi, Denny.
How you doing? How's things in California?
It's pretty nice. It's Memorial Day, so we got nice weather. It's going to be hot today, and we're opening up. Where are you guys coming from?
We're freezing in the Northeast. I'm in the Riverdale section of the Bronx, and David is in Connecticut. Denny, fascinating project, but let's start with you. You began as a drummer at the age of 5 years old. Your dad got you into music. Tell us about that.
Well, my dad was a drummer, and we were from that part of Pennsylvania where the Dorsey brothers were from, Lansford, Pennsylvania. We're from Lehigh, a few miles away. My dad actually played with some of them before they made it in the big band era. So when I was a kid, he used to drag me along when I was 3 years old and sit me on the stage next to the drums listening to big band. I was kind of a fan right off the bat.
Great education. I don't think you can get a better education.
No. Denny, do you remember a drummer named Don Lamond?
Sure.
Well, Don lived on the 14th floor of the building I lived in.
Okay.
And he was like a father figure to me. Took me to Manny's for the very first time, back when it was on the northwest side of 48th Street. It was in the brownstone. I used to sit by his hi-hat when he was doing the Les Crane show. I would cut school.
Don Lamont, he was one of the greats.
And then you studied with Roy Knapp, yes?
Yeah, when I was in the Navy, I got up there in Chicago, and I heard that Roy was still taking students, and even though he was up there in years, and I got to study with him throughout that year. I don't know how many lessons I had, but it was funny. Years later, I'm in, after Wings, after all of that stuff, I'm in Chicago producing a record, and I heard that Roy lived at 40 East Oak Street. That's the building right off the lakefront.
Okay.
So I went over to visit him one day, buzzes me in, and he's got a student in there. And then now he's really up in years, and he's teaching him off of the Ram album. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, what an honor. And he says, well, you're one of my favorite students. And I was just like blown away.
So let me ask you a question. When were you with Al Cohn and Zoot Sims? What years?
67, 68, maybe even some of 69.
Okay, so I saw you play when I was my very first year, I think, at Monmouth College. I was just a budding 17-year-old trying to figure out what the hell to do, but yeah.
6 sets a night, 6 nights a week, $100 a week.
What a great living.
And you usually drank or ate half that up,
Well, you figure $100 back then was probably worth a little more.
Yeah.
Maybe 150. Yeah, we didn't do it for the money, that's for sure. I'll never forget working with those guys, And Dave, did you ever know of a piano player by the name of Dave Frischberg?
No, I don't think so.
He wrote those songs like My Attorney Bernie and the Oklahoma Toad, all of those great, funny, kind of like a Bob Duro, very, very similar. Okay. They were great days. And the other piano player was Ross Tompkins from The Tonight Show. A great training grounds.
Wow. Denny, how did you break into doing session work?
Through that gig at the Half Note, the guys used to come down Sunday night to see who the new kid in town is. They got the gig, What happened was Mousy Alexander was going on the road. He's a drummer. He did that gig for years. And I heard about it through the grapevine. I might have been in the Poconos still. And Dave Frischberg was working with me up there. And he said, go down and tell Zoot you're a friend of mine and see if you can sit in. You'll get the gig. So I go down, drive down on a Sunday night, bro. I said, hey, Zoot, Dave Frischberg said I should come down and sit in with you and or ask you to sit in. And he said, oh, well, sure. Any friend of Dave's is cool. You must be decent. He says, what do you play? Drummer. He says, I hate drummers. And he let me play, and I got the gig, and we moved into town. And through that, all of the guys used to come down to see who the new kid had taken that chair was. And pretty soon the recordings started to come in, the jingles. There was a guy named Russ Savakis, who was a contractor in town. Russ started calling me for some of his work, and then Joe Beck took me under his wing. He was a hot item at the time, and Joe got me doing a lot of commercials and some records with Joe. And we had a little band with it was called, this would have been around 68, it was called The Pleasure Principle. It was Roger Kellaway, Tom Scott, Joe Beck, Chuck DeMonico, and me. It was a mixture of New York, LA guys. And we did some recording out here in LA. We played this Fillmore in San Francisco as The Pleasure Principle. And
who were you on the bill with there?
Canned Heat and some PG&E, Pacific
Gas and Electric, right?
Yeah.
It was wild. And the big thrill was Roger got to drive the truck up with the equipment. He always wanted to be a truck driver.
Well, I'll tell you a Joe Beck story. So my daughter's 16 now. So a couple of years ago, I picked her up at a friend's house. And the friend says, "Oh, you're a musician." I go, "Well, yeah." Said, "Well, I bought this house from Joe Beck."
The one in Connecticut?
Yeah.
We were there right before he died.
Okay. Yeah. So my daughter was over there because it was early summer. He had a pool. But I got a really bad story with Joe Beck.
But he does.
Yeah. So I'm 21 years old, just starting to get into do studio work. So someone, I guess it was Brian Alsop, missed a date. So Joey Levine, who was doing jingles at the time, called me to sub it out. So I'm there. It's my first date with Joey. I don't remember. It might have been Uncle Ben's Rice or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
I went in, read the chart down, first time, everything. Joe goes to me, he said, "You came in late, you subbed, you read it perfectly. You should charge them double scale." I never worked for Joey Levine again.
Well, Denny, talk about the temperament it takes to be a studio musician, because you're playing on the bandstand and you're young, you want to show off your chops, you want to add as much as you can, right? Too many notes, as we say. Get into the studio, you have to play to the song. It's a whole different mentality. And of course, talking about playing the songs, we'll get into working with Paul McCartney. How did you balance that from going on the stage and being a busy drummer to a guy who just plays what's needed to be in the studio?
I never went on stage being a busy drummer to start with. Let me tell you, Russ Savakis, again, the contractor, he played with me up at Mount Airy Lodge one night. He subbed up there because he lived in the Poconos, right?
Right.
And he said, "Wow, you're really good. You should be coming in. You should get into town. I'll get you working in the studios. That'll be a piece of cake working because you got the goods." So he said, "When you come in, though, come in with your ass through the door." I said, "What does that mean, Russ?" He said, "Don't come in and show us what you can do. Come in and do the damn job." So he invited me into the city for the first recording session I'd ever seen. And it was up on the roof of A&R 48th Street, up above Manny's, on that block.
Yep.
And so it was on the roof, and it was a Burt Bacharach date. That's hard to say. Burt Bacharach with do you know the way to say
Dionne Warwick.
Dionne Warwick. And Gary Chester was playing drums, and he had a stick and a brush. That's all he did. And I'm saying to myself, I can do that. And it was soft. Yeah. So there was no room for ego there or anything. That's doing the job. So when he showed me what the job was, I came in and he started calling me for work, and I showed up and I did the job. And that's how I rose to the top, so that when McCartney came to, I'll save you some time. When McCartney came to town to make a record, he went to Barry Greenberg. He was kind of a well-known folk guitar player that hung out with Dylan and all that. Paul probably knew him from Dylan, but he asked Barry for a list of the 10 or 12 of the drummers that were doing the best dates. So he gave him the list. My name was on that list. I was probably one of the first guys called in to the audition, because it really wasn't an audition. My answer service told me you had a date canceled out, but Barry wants you to hire you for a demo at such and such an address. And I said, okay, I had one fallout. I'll take this demo. I haven't seen Barry in a while. So I get there. It's a brownstone. Doesn't look like it has electricity even. I said, oh, this is fishy. I'm going to get mugged here. And so I walk up the steps, and there's a guy sitting in a lobby. The doors are wide open. Is there a studio here? He goes, basement. Well, no, now I am going to get mugged.
Yeah, right.
Down in the basement, it's a dirt basement, dirt floor. There's a set of drums in the middle of the room, and Paul and Linda are sitting over in the corner.
Wow.
I said, "Hey, you're Paul McCartney." He goes, "Yeah, that's right. That's me." I said, "Well, what's up?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to make a record here in town, and I'm looking at some drummers. Do you mind playing for me?" And I said, "Sure, I don't mind playing for you." I think the next line that I said got me the job. I said, "Can you, got a guitar or a bass? Can we play together?" He goes, "No, just you." I said, "Well, you can't get it on by yourself. You can't get it on with somebody else." And he kind of liked that. And so, did some channeling Ringo and him from the McCartney album. So I played some time feels and some shuffle and this and that and the other thing. And just in there 10, 15 minutes, he goes, "Oh, thanks. That's great. That's all I need, man." He said, "Thank you very much for stopping by." And I said, "Thank you, man. What a great opportunity to run into a Beatle,
Sure.
I was used to seeing big artists, but not Beatles. So I'm leaving. And I said, "I'll never get this. If he's looking at drummers, man, one of the other cats is going to get this gig." And pretty soon I started hearing chatter around the community about, "Oh, yeah, Bernard Purdy went down, and this guy," they all went down,
Sure.
And first of all, they said, "No, I told them to buy my record. I wouldn't audition." But I found out from Paul, they all showed up.
Sure, I'm sure they did.
So he calls me 3 or 4 days later. "Hello, this is Paul." I go, "Paul who?" I had to bust his cherries because we had fun. We had a good.
Yeah.
He said, "I want to hire you for this record, man." I said, "Just give me a minute. Let me look at my date book."
Oh, geez.
In the air. I said, "Yeah, I'll be there. I can do it. Don't worry. I'll be there."
So you called Radio Registry to sort of coordinate everything for yourself?
Judson 2, 8800.
Oh, geez.
They had the phone in Jim and Andy's. You remember that, Dave?
Right. And also at a place a little later called Possible 20. Do you remember Possible 20? Yeah, Jeff Lissauer.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the same. When Jimmy was gone, it was when Rocky was gone. Remember Rocky?
Yes, I do.
Rocky, the bartender, Gary McCartney would come in there and said, "Give me a glass of cognac, Rocky, no ashes," because they always had a big cigar.
What was so funny about it was that New York was one of the few places, Tom and I were talking about it before you got on, where you could be 13 or 14 and get a drink.
Yes.
Because Don Lamond, actually, the very first time I went to the Manny's, he took me to Jim and Andy's.
Yeah. The old Jim and Andy's was in the basement there.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's where I went in there and met Elvin Jones, and half of my heroes were in there the first time I walked into that place. I was like, there's a great book called Meet Me at Jim and Andy's.
Oh, okay.
Written by
fantastic.
Gene Lees, Gene, Gene Lees, the singer.
Sure.
Oh my God, it's just all of those great stories, If you got me talking about Jim and Andy's, I wouldn't stop. It'd be the whole interview. Because
what was the thing with the bass player? This one bass player called all these bass players to end up on the corner?
Oh, no, that's Joe Venuti.
That's it.
Joe Venuti, for a prank, he called like 10 or 15 bass players and said, "I'll pick you up at 49th and Broadway. Get your axe, string bass now. Get your axe. I'll meet you on the corner. I'll pick you up. We'll go to the gig." So, I don't know. They all showed up. They're all standing there in the corner. Another one shows up. And go, "Oh, no, something's up here." Joe drives by in a cab and waves at him.
That's it.
There's a worse story about Joe Venuti, though. One of his old friends, a guitar player that was walking with a cane. He was getting old. He said, "I got a couple of dates, some state fairs. Pays a lot of money, man. Come on you'll dig it, man. I'll make it real easy for you." He said, "I'm too old. I can't do that shit." So Joe talks him into it. They get on the road. Every night when this guy went to sleep, Joe would sneak into his room, take the tip off of his cane and file it down 1/4 inch.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I got a million stories. Jim and Andy's was like unreal. Unreal. I was my home. When I wasn't in the studio working, I was in there eating, buying dope, cashing checks, whatever, getting jobs. If one guy lost his set of vibes that were stolen from his studio, and Jimmy said to him, "Well, how much does it cost?" And this guy said, "Well, $1,500, I think." Jim just takes a wad out, gives him $1,500. He gets another set of vibes and goes back to work. After a while, if you don't get the money quick enough to pay Jimmy back, he gets you a job. That's what Jimmy Colaveras was.
Yeah.
That's why he was on the cover of Life magazine in a Yankee uniform. Oh, man, that place was unreal. Yeah, my heart, when that closed, my heart was broken, man.
Yeah, yeah. What was the other place? It was right by the Ed Sullivan's Theater.
Joe Harbor.
China what?
No, Joe Harbor's Harbor on 52nd, just north of 52nd.
Right.
Yeah. That was Joe Harbor's bar, the Harbor Light Bar or something like that. But
yeah.
If you were too close, if you had to walk down the street to the musicians union to pick up checks, you didn't want to go up to Jim's, you'd stop in there for a drink.
That was an amazing time. You know, you were there at the right time.
You know, it's kind of a testimony to Paul McCartney's sense of adventure to come to New York City. I mean, he's a Beatle. He's based in London. I mean, he could have gotten a superstar British band, right? And that's what I think everybody expected him to do. Yeah. Yet he came to New York City. Did he ever give any indication of why he decided to just change the backdrop?
Not really, but, you know, I always believe that the grass is always greener. You know, the New York cats would say, well, there's London cats, man. They're great, man. The London musicians that think New York was the best. You know, Linda being a New Yorker that grew up with the Alan Freed radio shows and all that. And Linda kicked his butt when he was up in Scotland, and they were just sitting there waiting for that Beatle crap to finished up. You know,
right?
So
Sure.
It was a very hard time, and all the angst that went along with that. He was up there writing songs, and Linda said, "Come on, we can't do this forever. We got to get out of here and let's go to New York and make a record. That's my home, and there's great players there." And Paul said, "Yeah, there's great. Let's get some pros. Let's get a different viewpoint." I really think that he came there knowing he was going to hire two guys, a drummer and a guitar player, and make a record with some pros that he wouldn't have to do anything except play his music.
David and I interviewed Ron Carter a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And Ron Carter, for the past 50 years, right, David, everybody has been asking him, what did you learn from Miles? And Ron said to us, well, let me tell you what Miles learned from me. Now, you know, I'm sure you probably have the same question with Sir Paul, but what did you bring to the table, Twins? What did Paul get out of having you in the drum chair?
All right, here's an interesting fact. There was no bass on the dates. That's what he got out of me.
Yeah.
So everything I played with my right foot influenced what bass parts he put on later. No, I got everything from him. He just had this sophisticated elegance about him that no other artist I ever recorded with had. He was phenomenal. I mean, his choices of notes, his choices of everything. Christ, the way he dressed. Just every choice that he made had this sophisticated elegance about it that was unheard of in those days. And, you know, in those days, we used to wear sport coats to work, sometimes a tie, you know. We were just coming out of that period, and when rock and roll was becoming a little more, when he would play that song that we were going to do that day, man, we'd just say, oh, my God.
That was Heart of the Country, Paul McCartney, with Denny Seiwell, our guest on drums. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
People will be talking or listening to this music maybe 50 years from now.
They certainly have. They certainly will, yeah. Another topic David and I broach with other artists is the year 1971. David, what is our short list? Who's next? Led Zeppelin.
So right off the bat, the very first Weather, Blue by Joni Mitchell, Tapestry, Mudslide Slim, Rod Stewart, Maggie May, right?
Herbie Hancock, Miles, Live Evil and Jack Johnson, Jethro Tull, Allman Brothers at the Fillmore, the Yes album, Tupelo Honey with Van Morrison. You have Soft Machine, right? Stones did Sticky Fingers. Now, in a lot of ways, Ram's production was kind of a continuation of Abbey Road, but I think what critics did, and I know you have a few good words to say about critics, as their job is to criticize, that Ram was certainly an album that kind of was out of its time. And the Beatles kind of, even though they still had tremendous respect, they were yesterday's news by the time the 70s were coming in, and the singer-songwriters and jazz fusion and of course, hard rock and things like that. So
it was more of an end of a cycle rather than yesterday's news. Beatles were
right. Okay.
It's kind of an end of a cycle where their growth spurt, if you would. I really think, well, first of all, there's no Hall of Fame for critics. That's right there. You know, I believe that the critics just had it in for him. You know, they thought that he broke up the Beatles, trying to do was save the money that they made, from Alan Klein getting his grubby paws all over it. So
Right.
he had to make some really hard decisions there that later on in life, they realized that he did the right thing. That whole period of time with all of that great music going on and the angst that he came with after, I don't know if you ever seen that film 8 Days a Week, but oh my God.
Yeah.
That just killed me when I first saw that, and I saw how powerful Ringo was and how those guys on the road, man, even though they couldn't be heard, they didn't have the right equipment or anything. It didn't exist really.
Right. It didn't. Right.
They were amazing. And here I am in the studio with this guy, and he walks in with that stuff. And I've recorded with a lot of big acts, but when he walks into the studio, straps on a guitar, sits down at the piano and starts singing, it's a different animal. It really is. And Ram just got me and Spinoza. I mean, it got our attention big time. And when Paul wanted to change, and he asked me to recommend another guitar player, and I worked a lot with both of those guys. Hugh McCracken.
Right, you did, yeah.
I said Hugh would just be great. So so he called Hugh up, and Hugh took the position, but either one of those guys, it was just the three of us. Spinoza, Paul, and me, or Hugh, Paul, and me, and that was it. Some fans sent me some outtakes of just the three of us doing tracking dates where you can barely hear Paul's vocal in the background and the three instruments. They're amazing. They're just so impeccable. Everybody was listening to everybody. Mm-hmm. And he never told me what to play except on Uncle Albert. I'm playing just the regular drum beat in the beginning. Uncle Albert, Uncle Albert. He said, "Can you think you can find something that kind of breaks it up and maybe stands so the vocal stands out a little more?" And I thought about it for a minute. Okay, boom, bap, boom, boom, shh, boom.
That was Paul McCartney, the James Bond movie Live and Let Die, with Denny Seiwell on drums. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
Even with Ram, I went up to the sweetening sessions up at the 799 with
Phil Ramone?
Yeah, Phil Ramone, of course.
Yeah. Oh, okay. He's not on here.
I am getting old. Phil, oh my God, when Phil recorded that stuff in the orchestra, was so amazed because Paul spent a couple of extra minutes tuning the orchestra. Here it is, the David Nadian string section, the best
right, David Nadian
on the planet. They're saying, why is he spending so much time tuning this very specific way? And the first playback, the guys went into the studio to hear the playback, and they said, oh my God, we don't sound like us. We sound like the London Symphony. Stuff like that. He tunes the bass. He tunes the A string flat and plays it in tune to get a bigger sound. Paul had so much stuff that just came to him naturally that he used in all of his creating music. It was, the more I saw about this, the more I said, wow. One of my only regrets is that I didn't stay. There were a lot of problems going on, and I just said, no, for night. I really should have sat him down and said, look, I need this, I need that. We'd still be together if we could have come to agreements on that. But it was just, I was there at the best and the worst times.
Yeah. Sure, all the things that were going on, outside and the whole Beatle litigation thing. There's actually an amazing book called You Never Give Me Your Money, which is just about their financial tangles. And just reading the book, I don't see how even any of the four of them could have gotten up in the morning with all the legal trouble that they were in and nearly bankrupt. Paul was, their money was being held in escrow.
I don't know if it's true, but I heard that 90 cents on every dollar went to the government taxes.
In England, in the UK. That's why you had so many tax exiles there.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to Ram. So now it's the 1990s. Indie rockers are starting to pay homage to that record. There is actually a couple of McCartney tribute records. I know of one very good one called Indie Rocker Tribute to Paul McCartney. And they did go and they dug out the deep tracks, from all the different Wings albums and stuff that you were on, like Wildlife, which was a fun little record, I think. Wasn't meant to be a big statement. And why can't rock and roll not be a big statement? And then, of course, there was, you did Red Rose Speedway, which was a little more orchestral, kind of a follow-up to Ram in that aesthetically. And now that Ram is getting respect and it's moved up in the world, people have reevaluated it. What prompted you to say, hey, we've got to make this record again? We've got to do a 50th anniversary edition.
That was my production partner, Fernando Perdomo.
Right, Fernando.
I met him at a lot of events around town. This guy, I call him a kid because he's 40-ish,
He is a kid.
I'm almost twice his age, but he's uber talented, and he has a studio up there, 8 minutes from my house. He's got a studio, and it really works great. And he's got beautiful drums. I don't have to carry nothing, you know. But he one day he approaches me and he says, "Hey man, I'm doing this project, and we're doing a couple of McCartney tunes for this. I forget what it was for. Some band project he had going on." He says, "We cut the tracks. All we need is some drums. Would you come up and play drums on Too Many People, and Some People May Never Know?" And I said, "Ooh, yeah, okay." I mean, he offered me a little taste to come up and do it. And I was like, "What the hell? I'll show up and put drums on your tracks." So I got up there, man, and I looked at the drums, and they were all mic'd up. I just picked up my sticks and played, you know. He turns the track on. Holy, what did he steal the track? What the hell? I mean, Too Many People was just like the track, but a different. And so, you know, I do this shit in my clinics, Beatle Fests and stuff like that. I'll do a Ram clinic. So it was nothing to play the drum track to it. He's blown away. So we get on to Some People May Never Know, and I hardly ever played that since the original recording of it. But it all came flooding back, and I just nailed the part there in 1 or 2 takes. And after that, he called that his audition. I was in. This kid knew what he was doing. It sounded like the original record with a tribute. There was a real sense of pride about what they were doing. They weren't trying to outdo anything or better. It was just paying tribute to something. These 40-year-olds and Gen X and all these younger generations of musicians thought Ram was their tops in their book.
They don't remember the original when it came out.
Yeah. So they were 8 years old, some of them, you know, like Fernando was 8 when he first heard it. You know, that was like a year and a half ago or something like that, just before the pandemic. So now the pandemic comes along and he says, "Hey, you know that it's the 50th anniversary of Ram?" And I said, "Get out." He said, "Yeah, it's 50, 71. 10. I said, "Wow, you're right. Let's do the whole album." I said, "Wow, that's an interesting concept." So I'll tell you what, let me call Paul. Let me see what he's got to say about it. So I got a hold of Paul, and I said, "Hey, these young guys, man, they want to pay tribute to our record. What do you think about all that?" He said, "Great idea. Go ahead, have some fun with it." So that's all I needed. I said, "All right, shit." So during the pandemic, I went up to the house, up to his studio maybe 2 or 3 times. One day I cut 8 tracks, drum tracks in 3 hours. I mean, I noticed shit. I had 50 years to remember it. Yeah. And a lot of times we didn't want any live recording there, so it would just be me and Fernando in the studio. And then he would send it out all over the world to these young cats that wanted to appear on the record. They'd put their parts on, send it back, and Fernando would put it all together. He did the heavy lifting. And I was, as producer, co-producer, I would say, you know, well, that's okay, but no, that doesn't work. We need the spirit of the original Ram here. And I don't want somebody to sound like Paul McCartney. I want somebody with the same spirit. And so I was the bad guy. Sometimes we'd have 5 guys singing on the album, and I'd say, "No, that guy Timmy Sean, he nailed it, man." So he would get the job. And then Fernando would just keep putting it together. And we got down to backseat of my car, which is really challenging for a vocal.
That's an epic composition, epic recording.
And one of my favorites, nobody can do what Paul did in 1971. It just wasn't any better than that, you know.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So I thought, geez, it's going to be hard. So we had 3 or 4 people audition for that. Wasn't quite right. And I had this buddy of mine from Nashville. He used to live in L.A., Brentley Gore. Brentley, I said, "Hey, Brentley, we don't have anybody singing on Heart of the Country. Now you're a Nashville guy. How would you like to sing on it?" And he said, "I love the album, but you think I could sing on Backseat?" I went, "Really?" So he said, "Yeah, man, I can do it." I went, "All right, give it a whirl." The night before he records the vocals, he did all of the vocals. The night before he records it, he gets a positive test on COVID. Gets up the next morning, and he does all the vocals before COVID hits. And when you listen to it, man, it's such a beautiful... He had the spirit, the passion of that track.
That was the Ram on 50th anniversary tribute. Brentley Gore singing lead. And this is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
You know, maybe nobody's going to have the same voice that Paul did, but he just nailed it so beautifully. And that's the way we felt about all of the choices that we made. I know I sent it to Paul. We made a little, a little teaser where you get 30 seconds of each track and some of the artwork. And I sent it over to Paul, and he said, really, he was a little impressed, you know. So if you can, that's why the other thing, these kids all have it in their DNA, but now they're recording and they are sure that their hero Paul McCartney is going to get to hear their performances.
That was Too Many People, also off the Ram 50th Anniversary Tribute. That was Dan Rothschild doing the lead vocals. And we've got Denny Seiwell, who did not only the original Ram, but this one too. Let's continue on CygnusRadio.com. This is the Notes from an Artist radio show.
Everybody gave a little extra.
Well, one of the guys is a friend of mine, John Montagna, the bass player.
Oh, I love what a beautiful cat he is.
This guy gives lectures at Beatlefest on the bass part to something. Yeah. And I mean, you could teach a college course on something. And John makes his own records. I've interviewed him a couple of times. And if you want to talk about some guy that catches the spirit of Paul McCartney's bass playing, not the exact notes, because that's not what it's about. It's about the groove and the feel. And I have to say, Ram On, of all the tribute records that have come out, because everybody's celebrating a 50th anniversary, right? I was like, boy, this one really nails it. This one captures what you guys did in the studio.
Yeah, and I must say, I did an interview with John. His interview and your interview, some of them my favorites, because we hit a lot of places that some of the regular guys don't go to. So I really appreciate it.
Where have we heard that, David?
Gee, you know what, Denny? That's part of what we're trying to do. Tom and I were talking about it this morning, starstruck with everything. And we just want to get the good stuff. Sure. I mean, I could spend hours just talking Dorchester Towers with you.
Yeah.
And you should, David.
Yeah, we really should. And you remember there was 20th Precinct right across the street?
Yeah.
It was the safest place to deal drugs.
I always felt safe there, I must say.
That's a whole episode.
Yeah, I saw Don Brewer nod out in the lobby before doing the Randall's Island Pop Festival.
Well, that's when I was saying I never heard the finished product until they dropped off a box of records for me. The doorman, he said, "Hey, you got a box of something down here." He hands it to me. I went, "Oh, it's this Ram album that I did with Paul." Open it up, take it upstairs, put it on the turntable, and the needle hits it. I went, "Holy fuck." Blew my mind. I mean, I hadn't heard him play the bass. I didn't hear any vocals. He and Linda did the vocals at night after we were gone, you know.
Sure.
And even when we came out to California to do a couple of tracks and go to the Grammy Awards, I just recorded the tracks with them, and we did Dear Boy and maybe something else out here. And went to the Grammy. I still hadn't heard the record. So, no, back in New York, man, and the doorman says, "You got a box of records." That blew my mind. It wasn't long after that he calls and said, "Hey, how about you and your wife coming over to take a little vacation?" That's all it was. We go over to Scotland, and he says, "I miss my old band. You'll want to form a band?" I went, "Oh, shit. Yeah, no, not me." I said, "Yeah, I'm in."
How great is that? I'm ready to move on. I want to talk
Let's go to the door. Keep going to the Dorchester.
No. I want to talk about your CTI recording.
Okay.
Oh. You know, that was an incredible period, too. That was some of the greatest music for a short amount of time. The album covers were brilliant. We were talking with Ron about Red Clay. And he had some wonderful stories about Freddie came in. He didn't have an intro, so I wrote one and stuff like that. But you were working with Astrud Gilberto. I mean, Creed Taylor, what a great producer.
The only thing bad about it was Rudy Van Gelder's studio was over in Jersey.
Right.
Yeah. A couple of sessions to get all the way over there to record, you know.
Yeah.
But the first time I was in there was Roger Kellaway, Tom Scott, Joe, and we did a record with...
That was J.J. Johnson, Kay Winding, doing Saturday Night is the Loneliest Night on the CTI record that our guest Denny Seiwell's playing on. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
Anyways, it's called Betwixt and Between. Probably one of their biggest selling records because it was a crossover period. It was a lot of jazz, a little samba. Ayrton played on a few tracks too, and some kind of pop stuff that we were doing, and it became a real popular elevator music. You know, I'd be on the road and I'd get into an elevator in a hotel, and there it was, Stormy, or one of those songs from that period of time. So I love going over there, even though the drive was a pain in the ass. But at Astrud, we did a record over there with Astrud and Stanley Turrentine. That was brilliant.
That was Stanley Turrentine and Astrud Gilberto doing Ponteo on CTI with our guest Denny Seiwell on drums. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
I played on Will Lee's very first session, 70, I think it was. We were doing a record for Bob Mann, the guitar player.
Sure.
Well, it was Bob's dad, Saul Mann.
Oh, wow.
So we did a $1.49 version of the Shaft Out album for Woolworths. And Will was a bass player.
Apparently, that was Will Lee's first recording session, and it had Denny Seiwell, our guest, on drums. Let's continue with Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
The other bass player I was on his first was a guy named Tony Levin.
Oh, sure.
Joe and
I heard of him.
Joe and I and Tony had a band, and the fourth guy was Don Preston from the Mothers.
Oh, wow.
Invention. We had a girl out front, Meredith Monk, an interpretive dancer.
Oh, yeah, she's great.
Red Lacet later hosted. And we had a little guy that used to be under a beach towel over on the side of the stage. And at the end of the show, the little guy used to just really slowly come across the stage while we were playing. That little guy was Danny DeVito.
Oh, my.
The band was called Aha. We were like, yeah. It was pretty much gone. But
you have a book in you, Denny. You have a book. You talk about CTI. We talk about RAM. A topic David and I bring up with all our artists is the album format, because now we live in a world of streaming and algorithms and Spotify and et cetera. You know, when I listen to Ram, to me, when I hear the track Too Many People, I expect to hear Three Legs next and Ram on. So it's not only a record that works, you know, track by track, it's an album as a whole. But now in the streaming world now, do you think the album format is still relevant?
I think so. Here's why. I did a record a couple of years ago. I have a jazz trio, an organ trio called Boomerang. Here we are. I got a mouse pad with them.
There you go. Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
So anyway, when I was putting this together, I produced the record. But when I was putting it together, I love the sequencing of songs so that one song rolls into another song and it's
so important.
The same type or the same key. Today you can put on a record and it might be 12 tracks. They all sound alike. They're all in the same tempo, the same keys. I just say, what the hell? I want an album to tell a story. And that's what Ram did. And that's why Fernando and I, we wanted to make sure that we did it exactly like the original record, then add on the first single, Another Day and Woman Oh Why, and then that little teaser at the end. But so we wanted to tell that same story. I mean, only a Paul McCartney would have thought of that. To go from Too Many People, whatever you want to call that, to Three Legs, so like a blues thing from the back porch, you know, those kind of things. Like just the way the album flowed, it just had such a beautiful thing. It's a shame to break it up. My record sold more vinyl than it sold CDs. So I think, in fact, to this Ram On thing, we've had such good response so far as sales that the company said we will be putting out a vinyl by Christmas.
Is it going to be a single album vinyl? Because it's a lot of information.
We talked about that. Yeah, you can only put 20 minutes aside. That's going to be a problem. So we'll probably have to come out with a double album or leave a couple off. Maybe you could leave the single off of it, or maybe one of the two Ram On tracks. Those Ram On tracks, they started out with, it's just Paul in the studio with a floor tom-tom, foot stamp, and a ukulele. He was making jingles for the album. And I thought, well, what the hell? Let me just throw it on there. And it's really somewhere in my record collection over here. I got a few records. Somewhere in there, there's a copy of the Brung to You by Ram. You spelled E-W-E, you know. And there are it's a whole vinyl copy of commercials that he did for the Ram album, the original.
Right, that's how you advertised in those days. Yeah.
That would be a great release.
Are you going to stream the record at all? Is Ram On going to be on?
Yes. The record, Cherry Red wanted to wait 6 weeks from the release date, so it was released May 14th. So at the end of June, it'll hit all of the streaming services. They just wanted to get it out now. It turned out to be a bit of a boo-boo because the post office, the British mail, and not the post office, the mailing services in Britain are stretched thin because of COVID. Everything is. The guy that runs Beatlefest, Mark, ordered 300-400 copies already. And some of them made it, some got lost. And we actually got a box that we signed and sent back to him, and he got them. So, but it's really been nuts trying to keep up with the manufacturing. Is cool. It's the shipping. So they're trying to work all of those details out now.
It's hard to believe that Ram On is a remote recording, because it sounds like you guys are all in the same room. I mean, that's a whole different dynamic. Really?
I told you, Fernando is uber talent. Really has it. He plays a lot of the guitar, the basses.
Yeah.
He put a part on Woman Oh Why. Crazy bass part at the end. He put that on, but then I said, you know what? We were done with just about all of his his guys. I said, I'd like to have a couple of my buddies on the record. So we had Will put a bass part on it. And then, of course, the head was just so beautiful the way Will approached it. But what Fernando played on the end, we said, well, just both bass parts on there. So another time of Smile Away, I said, oh, I'd like to get Davey Johnstone is a dear buddy of mine. Let's see if Davey from Elton's band, let's see if he'll just put a guitar solo on there. I don't know if you heard this yet. Oh my God, is it good? It's my favorite part of the record. Smile Away guitar solo, slide thing at the end. It's iconic. I love this guy and his playing, and they're going back on the road soon, and he's written a whole solo album in the Shutdown. And I've been in recording with him. We've
fabulous! We'd love to talk to Davey about the record. By all means,
it's going to be amazing. He's got half of his family on it too. Jesse played drums on some stuff. His son Elliot, who's 16, sings on a bunch of this stuff. And Charlie's played a lot of stuff and engineered some of this stuff. So it's a family effort, and his daughter's going to do the cover. It's really sweet. So I got Joey Santiago as well from the Pixies. And then Scott Spinoza and Marvin Stam put the original flugelhorn part on. So, it was there was last minute thoughts at the end. Okay, enough with your 40s and unders. I got a couple guys I want to get on the record. And it really turned out to be, it was a fun thing to do.
That's great. That's great. And then in this time frame, that's a nice thing to have happen. This last year has been challenging, right? So I tell Fernando he needs to call his studio Fernando's Hideaway.
You know what got me when came over here? I got a little video of the two of us playing drums. He says, yeah, I played. I said, I know you play drums, but come on, let's play. So he said, I'm just a Cuban kid from Miami that plays drums. That's what got me. Because he plays great guitar and bass and all the other stuff, but engineering and putting stuff together. But he's a killer drummer too, man. So we got some videos. I don't know. I might just get it up on YouTube or something like that. It might even be up there. I'm not sure.
The Ramon Ensemble perform live. I know Will Lee does the Beatles. The Fab Four, right? He does that. Fab Four, yeah. Right, and that travels all over he takes that all over the world, Will.
Yeah, he does. Well, I don't know if I could do a tour again, like I'm going to be 78 in July. I'm in reasonably good health, but I don't know if I'd want to. We do want to put together a live version. Next on the agenda, we want to do maybe key cities in the States and maybe like London. I don't know, but we're open to it. Yeah. But we want to be able to do it justice without adding synthesizers and all of that stuff. Right. Everything on the record, there's no synthesizers. Mm-hmm. We didn't use anything that wasn't organic. So we would have to figure out a way that we could do all of that stuff and pay justice to the music and do it live. Because I know the Fab Four, they have synthesizers all over the stage.
Right, they have to. You have to.
They have to. There's four or five guys, and they have to. Four guys, right? Rich is amazing. I mean, all of those guys. Jimmy Vivino, and there's five guys. That's right. But those guys really nailed it. When they come to town, sometimes they'll ask me to come sit in with them at one of their gigs, and I always love doing that. But nobody does. You'll never hear the Beatles like they can do the Beatles. Yeah. So anyway, if we can do it, we will.
Oh, that'd be great.
And it's great that it's Sir Paul approved.
Oh, yeah. If it wasn't, and I don't want to look like that guy that's all he's got, Because for years I hid out. I just didn't want to do any. I did some records, but I was mainly working with the orchestra, doing movie soundtracks. I just didn't want the madness of bands, There's a lot of stuff that goes along with any time, relationships and disappointments and what have you. So just going to work in a studio with 110 guys, you show up at 9 o'clock for a 10 o'clock session. You look through the book. You want to make sure you know what's coming at you. You put your markings in there when you know what parts you're going to play on such and such a cue. You take your 5 and 10 minute breaks and you get your lunch break and you hang out and you tell stories. I'll never forget being in the back of Waterworld. Kevin Costner comes back. Who does he want to hang out with? The drummers. Tells us some stories about filming over there in Hawaii. and all of this stuff, man. So I hung out for many years just doing that and playing in a club once in a while, just to keep the chops up, But now life is pretty sweet. I can do this Ram thing, feel good about it. I got my jazz trio. We're ready to get back on the road again, get back playing clubs again. That trio is, if you haven't heard, we have 2 records. First one's called Reckless Abandon, and that one has 5 McCartney songs on it.
What would you like us to play off those trio records?
The Boomerang did a version of Live and Let Die that's awesome.
That was Denny Seiwell's trio doing Live and Let Die. This is CygnusRadio.com, the Notes from an Artist radio show.
The Reckless Abandon, there was a bunch of songs on there that's coming up. Oh, we did a ballad, Dear Friend. Dear Friend, it was done in this room. That whole record was recorded in here. We just sat down and never rehearsed or anything. We just got we wrote out the chords, it's a ballad. And we sit down and play it, and we just stopped at the end of the take, one take only. We looked at each other and said, what the fuck was that? It was like one of those magical moments that just came over us, man.
That was the Denny Seiwell Trio doing Dear Friend. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
It was one of those love letters to John, The Boomerang album, I had a record deal with this Bruce Quarto and Quarto Valley Records, and I actually got Al Schmidt to mix it, which was beyond a treat. I knew and loved Al for many years. We just lost Al, Sitting at Capitol in his room, watching him do his thing, he said, come down about 11 o'clock. Give me a clue. Let me get some sounds and all that, I'll get it ready for you when you come down. So by the time I come down at 11 o'clock, he's got everything perfect. And he's got 3 faders, the organ, the drums, and the guitar. And then he says, all right, now I'm going to show you what I do here. And he pushes a button that adds that beautiful Capitol, like the echo chambers, that everybody's so Frank Sinatra on down loves.
Yeah.
And then he just does Al's thing, mixing those 3 faders, man. Oh man, I just sat there. I brought a little espresso machine down. We must have had 3 or 4 cups of espresso every session we did in there, man. It was just, I'll never forget that. Oh, well, there's a track called Curamin by Hector Camargos Marianos. It's kind of a Brazilian classical piece. That band just...
That was the Denny Seiwell Trio doing Curamin. This is Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com.
Boomerang is, we went after a lot of really difficult music. It's only got 8 tracks on it. When you buy the album, though, you get a card with the full 12 tracks.
I see. Yeah.
This record was such a ball to make, and we recorded it in a real studio rather than my little room here. It was just so much fun to do it the old-fashioned way. And I even had Edgar Winter come in and play on a track. He played sax on a track, and he actually appeared with us one night out at the place out here outside of LA called Bogies. He's still a good buddy.
When you listen to the tracks on the original Ram, now I can say for myself as a bass player, when I listen to something I recorded 30 years ago, what was I thinking? Or maybe you should have used a different tone. What do you think back of your drum tracks 50 years later? You nailed it?
And was I good? I didn't hear anything that I would change. I really didn't. I said, holy shit, listen to that. A raw energy and everything. And there were some places where I went a little nuts with the bass and boom, 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 like little New York show-off shit, You don't have to do that. But since there was no bass player there, I thought, what the hell? If he doesn't like it, he's going to stop me. He loved it. He made his bass parts around it. So when that's when Fernando approached me. I said, why would anybody want to mess with something that's perfect?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
The record was perfect. And so far, I've seen 2 reviews of some asshole said, why'd they bother doing that? He just didn't get it. It was a tribute to something that wonderful, Yeah. Yet it's different. It's a tribute. Yet it's different. The nuances are there. So that's what's so beautiful about it. Yeah, there's different people singing it. They're singing. It's in their DNA. They're singing with passion from their hearts, which is what makes it so real. We were just on the Sirius radio has been playing our music quite a bit too. And we were just on Breakfast with the Beatles. And, I couldn't believe
Chris
it.
Carter thing?
Yeah, Chris. Instead of playing our version of Monkberry Moon Delight, which is great.
Yeah.
Screaming Jay Hawkins, like, what? Anyway.
Well, I don't know if Paul's ever going to tour again, but I thought it was interesting that in maybe his last few tours with that band he's been with now for what, 20 some odd years, they are starting to do some of the material from Red Rose Speedway and Wildlife, which was neglected. And it's a shame because those were great records.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, I've been to see him a bunch of times over the years. He invites us down. They'll do a Wing song. The place goes nuts. The place absolutely goes nuts. He should get, there's only a few of us still alive, but, the fans, I hear it from the fans all of the time. In fact, after Linda passed away, the recording artists and actors against drunk driving asked me if I would go over and talk to him about doing a reunion. So I said, yeah, okay. So they set it up. My wife and I went, I wanted to see how he was doing without Linda anyway, And so we go over and we're hanging out. We're having it's really a nice reunion and stuff. And he knew that I was going to talk about it. So he said, yeah, let's talk to the guys, see who's interested. And if we can put something together, we'll maybe do something to benefit Linda's food company or something. I said, all right. So I called him back a couple weeks later. I said, everybody's into it. Everybody wants to do it. And he says, yeah, I've been thinking about it myself. And having a Wings reunion without Linda would be like having a Beatles reunion without John. So let's leave it alone.
It would be nice if the Bruce McMouse stuff came out. So there's got to be live tracks in the vault that would certainly make a nice archival live release of that band.
Yeah. All he'd have to do would be give me one opportunity to say yes, and I would be there.
Yeah.
I'd love.
Well, maybe when Let It Be comes out again, he'll start thinking that's going to be a big one, don't you think?
Yeah. It will be for sure. But I don't know. Over my years of being a friend and hanging out with Paul, I'm probably the only guy from the past that still has all his numbers. I can call him any. We're still good buddies, but he doesn't like to look at the past. And God bless him. He built an empire. Now he's got to run it. So.
Yeah, certainly. All right. Well, Denny, thanks for talking with us.
My pleasure. And I mean that. You guys are cool.
Thank you, neighbor.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to do another episode on the Dorchester. We'll have to do another.
Well, that was a great building. Come on.
That was our pad. Russell George kept the pad there, and every time we came to New York, he'd go to his house up in the country, and we could stay at the pad.
I'll tell you a great story. So my sister was going to the Fame School.
Right.
We get a call on the intercom one day, and I go, I'm 11 at the time. I go, hey, Denise, some French guy's on the phone. And she goes, you idiot, that's Sidney Poitier. I'm going to school with him in the morning.
Oh, my God. I made a movie with Sidney.
Did you?
Yes. I made a movie called Bobby, the Bobby Kennedy piece, with Emilio Estevez produced it, and Demi Moore. I was the band leader in the scene, and Demi was my singer. Anthony Hopkins was in it. Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, just everybody on the planet. It was Sharon Stone. It was a huge, it should have won awards, but what happens at the end,
Yeah.
The Ambassador Hotel, the ball.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to.
Oh my God, what a great film. If you haven't seen it, look it up.
I haven't.
Netflix.
Bobby, just Bobby. That's
okay.
And it's a lot of historic footage and stuff, but I got to meet some of those people. Nice meeting you, David and Tom. You guys have a great one.
Take
Over
care.
and out.
I want to thank our guest, Denny Seiwell, for a wonderful, wonderful interview. By the way, the last 3 songs we heard were all with Denny on drums. The first one was Give Ireland Back to the Irish, then My Love, and then finally Live and Let Die. Next week, we're going to have Michael League on board. Michael's been with Snarky Puppy, and we're going to talk about his new solo record. So tune in next Monday, 8 p.m. for Notes from an Artist on CygnusRadio.com. This is David Gross for Tom Semioli and Denny Seiwell, thanking you again for listening. Take care, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.